So in 2018, I set out to learn how screenplays were written. By early 2020, I had found a story that I wanted to tell. So I set out to plot and write its screenplay. At that time, I tried out a lot of screenwriting apps. While all these apps were great in formatting screenplays, but somehow they just didn't work for me when it came to plotting my story. When I watched a YouTube video where Christopher Nolan explains the story structure of Memento, I felt the need for an app that would help me visually capture the shape and flow of my story, much like the way Nolan did on that blackboard. So, when our Prime Minister announced the first lockdown in March 2020, I set out to build an app that would help me visually capture the shape and flow of my story. A few weeks later, when the first beta was ready, I shared it with a few writers and directors in our industry whom I really look up to. They used the app and gave me extraordinary feedback and helped shape the direction of the product. Almost 18 months and 68 beta releases later, Scrite is at 0.7.8 beta. Today, I want to walk you through some of the core features of the app so that right after this session, you'll be able to begin writing your next big blockbuster in Scrite. To install Scrite, simply visit scrite.io and download the installer for your platform. Currently, the app works on Windows, Linux, and Mac desktops and laptops. In a future update, we plan to support mobile phones, tablets, and web browsers as well. Let me first walk you through the basic UI of Scrite. When you install and launch Scrite, you'll be greeted with this splash screen. You can click anywhere on this window to dismiss it. The first time you launch Scrite, it will show you a list of keyboard shortcuts in a floating window. You can close this window, although I recommend that you review this once before you do so. If you want to reopen this floating window, you can click on Settings and then click on the Shortcuts option. The Screenplay tab is the first thing you'll see. This is where you'll be spending time while writing screenplays. The Structure tab is where you'll head to when you want to plot the structure of your story. This tab is the killer feature in Scrite, and I will be showing you several features of this tab in just a bit. Within the Structure tab, you have the Notebook. This is where you can capture story and character notes. If you prefer to move the Notebook to its own tab, then you can go to Settings and open Application Settings, go to Additional, and then uncheck this option that says Move Notebook into the Structure tab. And then click on this check mark, and you'll notice that the notebook has been moved to its own separate tab. The last tab is called Scrited. This is where you can create synchronized film and screenplay presentations. Right now, there is no document open in Scrite, and it is no fun seeing the app this way. Let me open Scriptali, our cloud library of screenplays, and open an existing screenplay. This is what the screenplay looks like in the first tab. I can pull out this panel to get a bird's eye view of all the scenes. Clicking on a scene will rapidly scroll to that part of the screenplay. The Structure tab is where we can view the story structure. In this film, the story structure is captured as 5 individual tracks, and each of these tracks are color-coded. The timeline is where the scenes are placed in a sequence. Let me open another screenplay from Scriptali. This screenplay is written entirely in Kannada. Again, this is what the Screenplay tab looks like, and this is what the Structure tab looks like. But let me show you the notebook in this screenplay. The notebook contains scene-specific notes for several scenes in this film. We also have character notes for several characters. Now I could move the notebook into the Structure tab. That way the notes are available for reference along with the screenplay. So that was a quick tour of Scrite's UI. Now that you have seen the basic UI of the app, let me walk you through the process of creating a brand new screenplay. Scrite's perspective of a screenplay is that it's a list of scenes. So the first thing you have to do is to create an empty scene. And the way to do that is by clicking on the New Scene button here. You can also click on this button in the toolbar or use the keyboard combination Ctrl Shift and N on Windows, Command Shift and N on Mac OS to create a new scene. Notice how Scrite creates space for your new scene. I'm going to toggle a setting called as Scene Blocks. So Scrite can render each scene as a distinct block. This is distinct from the approach taken by most apps which are page-centric. Those apps show you page breaks. Scrite doesn't do that because Scrite considers that the fundamental block of text in a screenplay is a scene. Each scene has two areas, the heading area and then the scene content area. The heading area consists of a few fields: the scene number, the scene heading, the character list, and scene synopsis. Scene numbers are auto-generated by default unless you explicitly change it. Every scene has a default scene heading, but you can click here and change it. The character list is automatically populated with character names as you write dialogues. We will see that in a bit. The synopsis area is where you can capture the outline of your scene. The scene content area is where you type action, character, dialogue, parenthetical, and transition paragraphs of your scene. Each paragraph must be explicitly formatted, and you can use these buttons here on the toolbar to format them. Let's fill some content into our scene now. Now this is an action paragraph. When I hit enter, it switches to the next paragraph, which is also assumed to be an action paragraph. Now let's type some dialogues. You can switch to character paragraph format by hitting the tab key, or by clicking on this button in the toolbar, or by using the keyboard shortcut shown here. Now when I hit enter, Scrite will assume that I want to type another character dialogue combination, so it's going to switch to the character paragraph format. Now when I hit enter, it will switch to dialogue paragraph format. This way I can keep typing dialogues one after the other. Sometimes you might want to use a parenthetical paragraph within a dialogue, so you can hit enter and click on this button here to switch to parenthetical paragraph type, or use the keyboard combination Ctrl 4 or Command 4. Now when I hit enter, Scrite will switch back to dialogue format again. Notice how Scrite automatically populates scene characters as you type dialogues. This is quite useful because eventually you will want to generate character reports, and this information will come handy. It's usually a good idea to capture characters who are present in the scene but don't necessarily have dialogues. So you can click on the plus icon and capture mute characters. Let's say Rachel was also present in this scene but does not have any dialogue. I can simply type Rachel's name in here and hit enter key, and notice how her name is captured as a mute character in the characters list. Mute characters come with a cross button, which means that I can click on this button and remove their presence in the scene at any point. Finally, let's type a transition paragraph. I'm going to click on this button and switch to transition paragraph type. So you may have noticed that Scrite provides autocomplete pop-ups for scene headings, character, and transition paragraphs. Now that we have written the screenplay with a lot of effort, let's save it. I'm going to click on the save icon here, give this file a name, and click on the save button. Now let's say you close Scrite and you come back after a day, and now you want to open the screenplay and continue working on it. Simply click on the open icon and select the file name from the recent files list, and Scrite will open that file for you. Or you can double click on the file in File Explorer, and your operating system will launch Scrite and open the Scrite document for you. Yet another way to open a Scrite document is to simply drag and drop the file on the Scrite window. We realize that some writers don't want to see so much UI while writing. You can turn off scene synopsis and character list from this menu here. You can also turn off the ruler in settings and even turn off scene blocks, so that way you will have a simple distraction-free UI for writing your screenplays. Many of you may already be using other screenwriting apps like Final Draft and Celtex, and you may be wondering if you can import your screenplays from these other apps into Scrite. And the answer is yes, you can import, and let me show you how. Suppose you have written a screenplay using Final Draft or any of the other apps that support the Final Draft format. You can simply drag the FDX file on the Scrite window to import it into Scrite. Since Final Draft format contains explicit markers for paragraph formats, the import will be accurate. Once imported, you can read the screenplay, further edit it, and even navigate to any scene in the screenplay. If you're a Celtex user, then you can export your screenplays to fountain file format and drag and drop it on your Scrite window. Screenplays imported from fountain files may have some import errors, and it might require you to explicitly go and correct them. Changes made to the imported file are not saved by default, so you may have to explicitly save them in Scrite. I want to stress on one thing, and that is Scrite's UI is scene-centric as opposed to page-centric like many of the other writing apps are. So you're not going to see pages in the Scrite's UI. But we do realize that writers like to track page count and page number while they are writing. So we provide access to all of that information, but within a scene-centric UI. The fundamental block of text in Scrite is a scene. So you won't see pages in the UI like you would in the other screenwriting apps. You could toggle scene blocks in settings to render each scene as a separate block. However, Scrite does provide information about current page and total page in the status bar. It also subtly marks page boundaries. By considering that each page of screenplay roughly translates to 1 minute of screen time, Scrite also shows the total time and current time on the status bar. As I move the cursor up and down, notice how the current time keeps changing in the status bar. If you would like Scrite to use custom time per page value, then you can head to Settings, switch to Page Setup, and here you can provide a custom time per page value in seconds. Since Scrite is scene-centric and not page-centric, it performs page layouting in the background as you type your screenplay. This consumes a little bit of CPU time. If you want to turn that off, simply click on the page icon in the status bar. The app will no longer show page number, count, and time, but it will be a tad faster. You can always turn background page layouting on by clicking on the page icon once again in the status bar. They say that the industry standard file format for screenplays is PDF. So it doesn't really matter what app you use to write your screenplays. Ultimately, you should be able to export it to PDF. Let me show you how to export your screenplays in Scrite to PDF. Like I said before, Scrite performs page layouting in the background while you type. This is done fast and by sacrificing some detail, because of which page count may not always be accurate. You can click on the preview icon in the toolbar to trigger accurate page layouting. When done this way, Scrite ensures that dialog blocks that cut across page boundaries are split using more and continued markers. This process is done even while generating PDF files. To generate a PDF of your screenplay, simply head to Export and choose Adobe PDF. The export dialog presents a bunch of options, but I'll simply click on Export for now. The generated PDF can now easily be shared via email, WhatsApp, or any other mode. However, before you share, please make sure that the title page of your PDF looks professional. To edit the title page, simply head to the top of your screenplay and click on the Edit Title Page button. In the resulting dialog box, enter relevant fields in your title page. You can even drag and drop an image onto the cover page area in this dialog box, and then finally click on the checkmark button. Scrite will show you the title page fields in the UI, and it will also bundle a well-formatted title page into PDF. You can also export your screenplays to Final Draft, to OpenOffice, HTML, and fountain file format. Now, I want to talk about language support. With Scrite, you can write in English and 11 Indian languages. We bundle an in-app transliterator and a default font for each of the languages supported in Scrite. But if you prefer to use your own font and an input method provided by your operating system for specific languages, you can do that as well. Let me show you how to do that and write in local languages. I've imported a screenplay in which many of the dialogues are already in Kannada, but let's say I want this dialogue to also be written in Kannada. All I have to do is go to this language menu on the toolbar and switch to Kannada. You'll notice that Scrite now says that it will transliterate every word written in English to Kannada. So I'm going to make some space here. Notice that transliteration is done as soon as I hit the space bar. Sometimes the transliteration may not be the way you want it. For example, the words Tindidu and Ninge doesn't look right. Scrite's transliteration is static, so it doesn't exactly work like Google Translate. You can pull out the alphabet mapping table by clicking on this icon here on the toolbar and figure out what combination of English letters will give us the result that we want. For example, here I can find out that if I want to write Ninge and Tindidu, I have to use M rather than N in the English text that I write. So I'm going to go back and rework what I write here. Now they look right. So I can go ahead and delete the old dialog and just use the transliterated Kannada text. This kind of table is shown for every language supported in Scrite. You can also use input methods from the operating system with Scrite. For example, on Mac, I can go to System Preferences, Keyboard, Input Sources, and add the phonetic Hindi keyboard as an input source. I can get back to Scrite, go to Settings, Transliteration, and against Hindi, I can configure Scrite to use the input source from macOS. From now on, whenever I switch to Hindi language in Scrite, it will automatically enable the phonetic Hindi keyboard in macOS. Let's say you want to type all dialogues in Hindi. You can head to Settings, Formatting Rules, Dialog. Now you can select Hindi in the language combo box. This will cause Scrite to automatically switch to Hindi every time you write a dialogue. And when you switch to any other paragraph type, it will switch back to English. Scrite bundles a default font for every language it supports, but you can head to Settings, Fonts, and change the font it must use for different languages. This will cause Scrite to use that font for display as well as in PDF files. That was a quick tour of language features in Scrite. Let's now move on to exploring other features. Because Scrite's UI is scene-centric, we get a bunch of goodies like color coding scenes, marking scenes as a song or an action or a montage scene, being able to capture scene comments, removing the scene or reordering scenes. All of this is really very simple. However, when it comes to things like editing the title page, inserting scenes between two existing ones, or splitting and merging scenes, things are a tad bit different. Let me walk you through these features now. As a writer, you may want to color code your scenes so that it reflects the mood or temperament of the action or drama happening in them. To color code a scene, simply click on the scene menu and in the color submenu, pick a color to apply it. If the color you're looking for is not already listed in that menu, then you can simply click on the plus icon and choose a custom color and have that be applied to your scenes. Scene colors are used as background in the scene heading area and also against the scene heading in the scene list panel on the left. Later on, you'll see that the same scene color is used on the index card that represents the scene. The Shuddhi screenplay in Scriptalai makes effective use of color coding for representing different timelines in the story. The police investigation timeline is marked in red color. The life of Jyoti when she was alive is marked in grey color. The life of Carolyn, who travels to India to avenge her friend Jyoti's death, is marked in orange color. As you scroll through the scene list, you can see how these tracks are intertwined. In addition to color coding your scenes, you could also mark scenes as song, action, or montage scenes. For example, these scenes here are simply montages. No real action or drama happens here, so I can mark them as such. Similarly, if there were song scenes or action scenes, I could have marked them as well. When I now look at the scene list panel, I get a really quick overview of how these scene types are placed. The key reason why we are able to provide these features is because Scrite's UI is scene-centric. Another benefit of a scene-centric UI is that it makes it easy for us to reorder scenes. To reorder a scene, simply drag the scene on the scene list panel and drop it at its new position. That's it. But when we have to insert, remove, split, or merge scenes, we have to do things a little different. Since each scene is a distinct block, you cannot insert a new scene by writing the new scene heading like you would in the other apps. You will have to explicitly create a new scene block. Let me turn on scene blocks so it's easy to understand. Now each scene is rendered as a distinct block in the Screenplay editor. Now let's say you wanted to insert a new scene between scene number 4 and 5. Simply place the cursor on scene number 4 and click on this button in the toolbar. Or use the keyboard shortcut Command Shift and N. The newly inserted scene heading is exactly the same as that of scene number 4, except that it says later. You can click on the scene heading and change it to anything else you want. To remove a scene, simply click on the scene menu and then click on remove. To split a long scene, simply place the cursor at the beginning of the paragraph across which you want to split and hit the keyboard shortcut Command and Enter. Again, notice that the scene heading is same as before with later. To merge them back, place the cursor at the beginning of the scene and hit the keyboard shortcut Command and Backspace. These keyboard shortcuts are listed in the Shortcuts floating window, which you can pull by clicking on the Shortcuts menu item here. As you use the app, the scene-centric approach is likely to grow on you because it naturally blends with the way in which you visualize and make films. Next, I want to talk about the defining feature of Scrite, the Structure tab. For this, we have taken inspiration from video editing apps where you have an area to import raw video clips, another area where you edit these clips, and a third area where you clip and sequence clips to make your film. Much the same way, Scrite has Structure Canvas on which you can create scenes, a feature-rich text editor where you can edit these scenes, and yet another area where you can place these scenes in a sequence to make up the screenplay. By using all of these features, you can effectively capture the shape and flow of your stories. To switch to the Structure tab, simply click on this button here. Like I said before, there are three areas: the Structure Canvas, the Scene or Screenplay Editor, and then over here is the timeline. Let me explain this tab with the help of an example. I want to tell the story of three people. One is a schoolgirl who is simply unable to solve math problems given to her as homework, but can very easily solve complex math and geometry problems when she is doing carpentry. The second is that of a boy who is unable to crack software programming problems given to him in his lab exam, but ends up becoming an extraordinary programmer when he is asked to solve real-world problems at work. The third is that of another boy who is simply unable to by heart poems as a child, but can effortlessly render long poems as an actor on stage. It's a very simple story. I made it up so that it can help me showcase the features of Structure tab. First off, let's start by creating the scenes. We have three characters, each of whom have a before and after scenario. So let's start by creating a scene for the schoolgirl by clicking on this button here, and then selecting New Scene, and then by clicking on an empty part of the canvas here. Scrite creates an index card for me. There are three parts to this index card. One is the heading, the second is the synopsis, and the third is the footer. Let me fill in the heading. We now fill in the synopsis of this scene. Notice that when this index card is selected, over here we can see an empty scene on the right. Let me go ahead and fill out the scene with some content. Let me create another index card for her after scenario. Now I'm going to color code these scenes. So I'm going to click on this icon, select both of these index cards, right click and select color for the index card. Let me create before and after scenarios for each of the boys. Now we have 6 scenes, each with their own synopsis and scene content. But these scenes are not yet a part of the screenplay. These scenes are just raw materials at this point. If I switch to the Screenplay tab, you'll notice that it is still empty. Now, let's put on the chef's hat and mix these up into a screenplay. You see the timeline below? This is where you can sequence your scenes that make up your screenplay. Let me add the before scenario of the girl to the timeline first by clicking on the plus icon to the bottom right corner of the index card. As soon as the scene makes it to the timeline, it has become a part of your screenplay. So now when I switch to the Screenplay tab, you'll notice that it is here. Okay, let me add her after scenario scene. Again, I click on the plus icon to the bottom right of this index card. Notice how an arrow shows up on the structure canvas highlighting the flow of my story. I'm now going to repeat the same process for the other index cards. Before, after, before, and after. Now that we have placed the scenes in a sequence, this has become our screenplay. If I switch to the Screenplay tab, you'll notice that all of these scenes are now showing up in a sequence. When I pull out the scene list panel, you can see that all 6 scenes have made it to the screenplay. Notice how these arrows are showing the flow of story in your screenplay. Let me place these index cards apart so that you can see these arrows more clearly. You can clearly see that the story starts here and flows through all of these scenes. But now I'm having second thoughts about the way in which these scenes are sequenced. I want for all the before scenarios to be shown in one stretch and all after scenarios to be shown in one stretch. So I'm going to reorder my scenes on the timeline. As you can imagine, this would be a completely different screenplay from what we had before. Notice that the arrows now change to reflect the new flow of your story. Now let's say after these 6 scenes, I want to add montages of before and after scenarios of each of these characters in quick succession, so that it adds some closing drama to the film and I can finally reveal the film's title. But this time I'm not going to actually write the scene content other than the scene heading itself. And also notice that since I've not added these cards to the timeline, they're grouped under unused scenes in the structure canvas. Now, I'm going to sequence them on the timeline so that I get the sequence right. Let's say I want to take help of a friend of mine who is really good at writing final images of a screenplay. I can simply share this Scrite document so that when he opens, he can turn on scene synopsis and read the outline and work on the scene content appropriate to that. So this way, you can have 2 people working on a screenplay, one of whom works on the outline and structure, the other who works on detailed scene content. I once wrote a screenplay which had 3 tracks. The orange cards follow the life of 2 characters, Nagi and Manja. The purple index cards follow the lives of 2 other characters, Rakesh and Ramya. The blue index cards follow the life of another set of characters, Maruti and his wife. Their lives intertwine because of an incident, and I was able to easily visualize the plot by creating index cards for each track on a separate row and then mixing the scenes from each of these tracks on the timeline to dramatically narrate the story. This allowed me to comfortably write a 33-page long screenplay without losing track of the big picture. Now you can imagine how useful a feature like this would be when you are writing non-linear screenplays where the story flows between multiple timelines. We understand that creating scenes on the canvas and then pulling them on the timeline looks like a lot of work. We do have a simpler way of doing this. Simply click on the new scene icon in the toolbar or use the keyboard shortcut Command Shift and N. This will cause scenes to be created on the structure canvas and also added to the timeline. Usually when you're working on story structure, you don't want to see the scene editor, so you can collapse it to one side. So that way you'll have more space for the structure canvas. If you're not a fan of the preview, then you can simply turn it off by clicking on this icon. Remember I told you before that Christopher Nolan's video on the story structure of Memento was the inspiration for this tab? So if Mr. Nolan was using Scrite, he would probably plot the story structure of Memento like this. Now I know some of you are thinking, well that's all great, but I'm far more familiar with 3-act and 5-act structures and I would much rather see my index cards placed in different rows, one row for each act. Well with Scrite you can do that too and let me show you how. Since starting the Scrite project, I have had an opportunity to interact with quite a few writers who like to begin with 40 index cards spread across 3 acts, and then they fill their story into these cards before they actually start writing the screenplay. Let's see how we can do that in Scrite. So I start by creating 10 scenes. Notice how they're grouped under Act 1 by default. Then I'm going to add my first act break by clicking on this button. Now I'll add 20 scenes into Act 2. Now I'll add another act break by clicking on this button. Finally, I'll add the last 10 scenes into Act 3. So I have my 40 index cards. Let me now zoom out and take a bird's eye view. Notice how Scrite automatically lays out the index cards in a regular row layout. This is what you would do on a whiteboard with post-it notes in the writer's room. Now, you can click on this button here that says Beat Board Layout to ensure that these index cards are always laid out in this form, even if index cards are moved from one act to another. For example, let's say I move this index card from Act 3 into Act 2. You'll notice that it got added at the end of Act 2 in the structure canvas. Some writers prefer to break Act 2 into two parts across the interval point. I can now go to the 20th index card and insert a new act break after it. You can notice that the structure canvas was automatically updated to show the 4 acts. With this 40 scene and 3 act template ready, you can go ahead and plot the story by filling out the synopsis into each of these index cards, get the overall plot and structure right before you actually write the scenes in the screenplay editor. Until November 2020, this is all we had on the Structure tab. And then I met a team of writers at a leading film studio here in Bengaluru. During my interactions with them, I got to understand that their approach to structures is a bit more formal. Like others, they also break down their stories into 3 acts and place their index cards on a corkboard. But they also make use of formal story structures like Hero's Journey or Save the Cat or some of their own built in structures to make sure that their story hits all the key dramatic points. One of the writers also suggested that I read this book, Save the Cat from Blake Snyder, so that I get an understanding of what their process looks like. Many of the screenwriting apps out there allows writers to design their story structures on a corkboard. However, this whole process of making sure that the design stays in sync with the flow of story in the screenplay is a manual process. In Scrite, we wanted for that to be implicit. Between November 2020 and April 21, we built a lot of features in Scrite that would help writers map formal story structures on their index cards and implicitly keep the flow of story in their screenplay in sync. This approach makes story creation so much more productive. Let me show you a demo. Blake Snyder, in his book Save the Cat, explains how we can build a compelling story by hitting 15 key dramatic plot points, or plot regions if I can call it that. Scrite bundles Save the Cat as the default structure, but you can change it, and later I'll show you how. Let's start with 40 index cards. What Save the Cat says is that every story has to begin with an opening image. So what I'm going to do now is take the first index card of the first act and click on this button here that says tag the selected index card and then select opening image. Now as soon as I tag this index card with opening image, you'll notice that the footer of this card says so. Now I can click on this button here that says grouping options and select Save the Cat to get Scrite to group index cards based on their structure beats. Next, we should spend some time setting up the before world. So I'm going to go click on this button, select the next 4 index cards, and I am going to tag this as setup because this is where I'm going to write the setup part of my screenplay. One of these index cards has to also state the theme of the film. I'm going to select this index card. I can go here and select theme stated, but I can also right click and from tag groups select theme stated. This is another way to tag an index card. Now like this, I'm going to go ahead and tag the remaining story beats. If you have not read Blake Snyder's Save the Cat before, I highly recommend that you read the book once. You don't have to actually use it in your screenplays, but it surely helps understand the idea of structure. Now that I have plotted all the 15 beats, I have a mold into which I can pour the story. All I have to do is to fill out these index cards with synopsis that matches the story beats so that we have a structure in place for our screenplay. Then we can work on detailing individual scenes in the screenplay editor. Writing screenplays this way allows for us to always keep the big picture in mind while writing individual scenes. Once we got this far, we built a few ready-made structure templates that writers can use to build their story on top of. To access structure templates, you can pull open the Scriptali by clicking on this button and switch to Templates tab. Pick from any of the templates listed here and click on Open. This is Save the Cat template. We already have 40 index cards placed into 4 acts. Beats from Save the Cat structure have already been tagged onto these index cards. Additionally, each index card has synopsis from the film Lion King, which you can use as reference to construct your own story beats. The image annotation here gives you a visual overview of the structure. Optionally, you can click on this link to read more about Save the Cat structure on our website. Every time you click on the New File button in the toolbar, Scrite shows you a set of templates. In here as well, you can pick a structure template and open it. Now, once you create your own structure based on this template, remember to save it locally. Now, you may be wondering if it's possible to use all of these tools on your existing screenplays. When you import your screenplays from Final Draft or Celtex, Scrite would have created an index card for every scene that it imports. And then it would place all of these index cards in a simple flow vertical layout on the structure canvas. Now you can simply go ahead and add act breaks and tag your index cards to break down the structure of your screenplay and make sure that it hits all the key dramatic moments. I'm going to import a screenplay in Final Draft format. When I switch to Structure tab, I can notice that Scrite has created an index card for every scene that it has imported. And all of these index cards are placed in a simple flow vertical layout, and it doesn't make much sense, structurally. So the first thing I want to do is to break down this screenplay into 3 acts, with the second one broken down further around midpoint. We have our first act break after scene number 47. So I'm going to click on scene 47 and then click on this button here and insert an act break. The midpoint is somewhere after scene number 85. This is scene number 85. So I'm going to insert another act break here. And then finally, the actual act 3 starts after scene number 132. So I'm going to click on this index card here and then add another act break. Now I know that it says act 4 instead of act 3 and it reads act 3 instead of act 2A. So I'm going to go here and then select Save the Cat so that these act names are labeled appropriately. Now I'm going to click on this button to arrange the index cards in a row layout. Now if I click on this button and select acts again, you'll notice that each of these index cards are grouped properly. But then I'm going to go back to Save the Cat now. Now I can further break down this screenplay by tagging structural beats. For instance, the first 4 scenes make up the opening image. Now, while I'm breaking down the structure, I don't actually need this, so I'm going to collapse it to one side. The scenes from 5 to 19 is where the setup happens. Notice that as I tag these index cards with beats from Save the Cat structure, notice how beat tracks show up on the timeline as well. So this way I know that the opening image beat lasts from here to here and the setup beat lasts from here to here. In fact, we need the 19th index card to also be part of setup. And you'll notice that the track extended to include the 19th scene as well. Now let's say I want to stack all of the opening image cards into one bunch so that it makes the structure look a bit more easy on the eyes. So I can simply drag this index card and drop it on top of the first index card in opening image. Now what happens is that all of these 4 cards show up as a single stack. Another way to stack index cards is to select a bunch of index cards, right click, and then select the stack option. This will also cause the selected index cards to stack on top of each other. Like this, I can go ahead and tag the remaining cards, stack them as necessary, and break down the structure of my screenplay. Once I finish doing that, it makes it easy for me to read through the screenplay while keeping the big picture open. I can rework, reorder, remove, insert scenes as I fine-tune my screenplay. If I want to simply share my structure with somebody, I can click on Export and select Screenplay Structure in this menu, and Scrite will generate a PDF of just the structure canvas. That was about the structure tab. Now let me talk about the notebook. From the very first public beta of Scrite, we always had a notebook that allowed writers to capture their notes against the entire story, the active scene, and also against individual characters. But personally, I was never happy with what we had in the notebook. One of our early adopters sent me a YouTube link in which writers of a noted web series explain their writing process, in which they start by capturing research about their characters, and then they break down their story into episodes, acts, and individual scenes. It's only after they are done with the research do they go and work on the structure of individual episodes. Today, we have a notebook that is very comprehensive in its ability to let writers capture their story research and also refer to it while they're writing their screenplays. Let me show you a demo. This is the notebook. Here, one can organize research in the form of notes and capture them against the story, an episode, an act, a scene, or character. Now, let's say we want to plot episodes of a TV show. We've been talking about films so far, but Scrite can be used to write series as well. For the purpose of this demo, I'm going to take the example of Family Man. Let's start by capturing some top-level information in the screenplay section. Here, I can capture the logline of the show. And I can switch to the Notes tab to capture notes against the screenplay. So to create a new note, I can either click on this button, which seems more logical, right? Or I can select Screenplay and then click on this button as well. So I'm going to create a simple note. Now, if I want, I can drag and drop some additional attachments to this. For example, let's say I want to capture some news clippings. So I can drag and drop these attachments. They get collected here. I can always double click on these attachments to take a look at what they are. As attachments, I can drag and drop images, Word documents, PDF files, movies, audio clips, anything. I can create more than one note here. And against each note, I can capture a distinct set of attachments. So this is my top level information about the screenplay. Now, since web series are heavily based on characters, we might want to start with character research first. So let's create our characters first. I click on this section that says characters. In the add/search field, I will type the names of the characters that I want to create one by one. So the protagonist's name is Srikanth. As soon as I hit enter, it creates a section for me in characters. Here I can capture some information about the character. In this area, I can write some character summary of Srikanth. I'm going to leave this place empty for now. Additionally, I can add a photograph to the character. I realize that while writing, we may not know who would be cast for the role. But as a writer, if I have someone in mind, then I can use their photos tentatively if it helps me write better. So I'm going to go ahead and add Srikanth's photo here. Like this, I'm going to go ahead and create other characters from the show. Now, against each character, I can add notes. For example, let me double click on Srikanth and switch to the Notes tab within Srikanth's notebook. Here, I can add Srikanth's notes. Notes for a character can be simple text notes, or they can be elaborate form notes. Forms are served by Scriptali, our cloud library for screenplays and templates. They make it possible to collect structured information about a character. For example, I can add a character sketch form which offers me 10 questions that I can answer to get a grip of my character. I can alternatively add a longer form called as character interview and answer close to 100 questions if I want to really get to know my character inside out. But I can also add simple character notes with a heading and some text and also add some attachments to this note. Now, let me switch to Shrikant's notebook page and I'm going to switch to the relationships tab. Now this is a unique feature in Scrite. You can capture relationships between various characters in your show. For example, I'm going to go ahead and add some relationships around Shrikant. I'm going to select Shrikant and click on this plus icon. It's going to present to me a dialog box with all the other characters that I've captured. So I can now go ahead and write how Shrikant is related to each of the characters listed in here. When I click on the Create Relationships button, you'll notice that Scrite renders all of Shrikant's relationships in a simple graph. Now, let's go ahead and add some relationships of Suchi. So I'm going to double click on Suchi here. You'll notice that Shrikant, being a husband, is already captured in her relationship graph. Let me go ahead and add other relationships around Suchi. I'm going to click on Create Relationships. Now, in addition to Shrikant being a husband of Suchi, she is also mother of Athav and Dhriti, and she is colleagues with Arvind. Now, notice here that since we had registered Shrikant as a father of Atharv and Dhriti, that is also visible in this relationship graph. Now, I'm going to double click on Dhriti, add Kalyan as her love interest. This way, I can go on adding relationships to each of the characters in the show. Now, at any point of time, if I want to edit a relationship name, I can simply click on the relationship name and it will give me a dialog box where I can edit it. Or if I want to delete a relationship, I can simply click on the character icon and then click on this delete button. Now, once we capture relationships for all of the characters, I can simply switch to the characters section in Notebook, and under relationships tab, I can now see that Scrite is showing me a complete web of characters in the show. Okay, next we probably want to create broad strokes for the 9 episodes that we are going to write. So let's go ahead and create these 9 episodes. I'm going to click on Screenplay and then click on this button to create my first episode. Under episode name, I'm going to write the name of the episode, and in episode summary, I'm going to write the summary of my episode. Like this, I'll go ahead and create episode summaries for all the 9 episodes. Next, I probably want to break down each of the episodes into 3 acts. So for example, the first episode has 3 acts. So I'm going to click on episode 1 and then add my 3 acts to this episode. Let me type out my act 1 summary here. This is my act 2 summary and this is my act 3 summary. In each of these acts, I probably want to add a few scenes. So I'm going to add a few scenes in act 1. And a few scenes in Act 2. Against each scene, I'm capturing the scene synopsis. Like this, I'll go ahead and create episode, act, and scene summaries for the remaining episodes. By doing this over several days or weeks, we would have captured significant research for our TV show. Then we can switch to the Structure tab. You can see that a broad structure is already captured here. Now, all we have to do is to simply go ahead and fill out the scenes. As you can notice, all of the scene synopsises that I wrote in the notebook is already present on the index card. I simply have to detail the scenes in the screenplay editor. For sure, we'll be adding more scenes to each act than what we had created in the notebook. For instance, let's say I want to add another scene after this one. So I'm going to click on this card to make it active, and then I'll click on the new scene button in the toolbar. This will cause a new scene to get inserted, but now you will see that the layout of cards in the canvas is messed up. We can click on this button to force beatboard layout. This way, index cards on the canvas will always show up neatly laid out. Now, if I add another scene after this, it will show up neatly in the act row. To delete a scene, simply click on the scene and then click on the delete button here, or you can right click and select delete. You'll be presented with a delete confirmation. You can click yes to actually delete the scene. Scenes deleted on the structure canvas this way will be deleted from both the timeline and structure. If all you want to do is to simply remove a scene from the timeline, then you can right click on the scene that you want to remove and then click on the remove option in the context menu. This will cause the scene to be removed from the timeline. However, notice that it shows up in a group called unused scenes because it is, well, unused. Now, if you want to delete this scene from the structure as well, you can click on this card and hit the delete key and then say yes in the delete confirmation message. This will cause the scene to be permanently deleted. Just like you can remove scenes from the timeline, you can also remove act from the timeline by right clicking on the act break in the timeline and clicking the remove menu item. Now, whenever you click on an index card in structure, you'll notice that the timeline will animate the index card that was just clicked on. This way, you'll be able to easily understand what index card on the structure canvas corresponds to what index card on the timeline. Now, as we write our screenplay, we may want to pull research about a specific scene or a character and then refer to it while writing. So we can go to Settings, Additional, and move Notebook into the Structure tab. You'll notice that the notebook has now been moved into the Structure tab. As I switch scenes, the corresponding scene on the notebook is going to be pulled up. So you can refer to the notes you have written against that scene. That's the default behavior, but you may want to turn that off. For example, let's say I'm looking at a character note. Now I don't want Scrite to show me notes for this scene as soon as the cursor is taken there. So I can click on this button to turn off the syncing. That way I can be on any notebook page and it doesn't matter where I take my text cursor to, the notebook page will stay put. I can turn this syncing back on by clicking on this button again, and now the notebook page will remain in sync with the current scene. Now sometimes you may want to bookmark a note. For example, let's say I want to bookmark the character sketch of Srikanth. So I'm going to click on this note here and then click on this icon to bookmark it. And notice how the icon changed to let me know that this note is currently bookmarked. Now I'm going to go ahead and bookmark another note, and this time I'm going to bookmark a screenplay note. So again, I'm going to click on this icon and notice that the icon changed here. If I switch to the bookmarks section, I'll be able to take a look at all of the bookmark notes. So I can double click on any of the items listed in the bookmark section and it will take me to that note. Clicking on this icon once again is going to remove this from the bookmarks list. So I don't have that in this bookmarks list anymore. So I'm going to double click on this and then click on the bookmark icon for this note as well. And you'll notice that we are back to having no bookmarks in this section. Let me enable character lists in the screenplay editor. So I'm going to go to settings, screenplay options, and then enable scene characters and tags. So you can see that there are characters visible here. Let's say that in this scene, Srikanth is present, right? So I'm going to add Srikanth as a character to the scene. I have not yet figured out what kind of dialogues and scenes to write for Srikanth. So I'm simply going to add Srikanth as a mute character for now. So if I click on Srikanth, you'll see that a menu pops up. And in this menu, I can click on character notes, and this will cause Scrite to show me all of the notes that I've compiled against Srikanth's character, including the character sketch and everything else that I had written for Srikanth. So this way I can refer to my notes while I'm writing. So that's the notebook in Scrite. In a future update, we'll be adding sections for capturing locations and prop notes as well. When we finish that, you'll be able to include these notes into reports generated using Scrite, which is something that we're going to talk about next. Scrite comes bundled with a few report generators, using which you can generate several types of pre-production reports. Whether it's a character report that you want to hand over to your actors for them to prepare their dialogues, or a location report that you want to hand over to the assistant director, or a scene versus character matrix, Scrite has you covered. Let me show you a demo. I have opened the screenplay of Shuddhi. It's always easy to demonstrate reports with an existing screenplay. Now let's say You want to generate a report that simply lists all the scenes in which a character, say Jyoti, is present, along with her dialogues if she has any dialogue in a particular scene. Otherwise, we simply want to know whether she's present in the scene or not. So I can click on Jyoti and then click on character report, and I get a dialog box. I'm going to simply hit on generate now. This is going to generate a PDF file that contains a simple character report. It says that Jyoti speaks 51 times and is present in 70 scenes, and it's going to simply list all of the scenes in which Jyoti is present, even if she does not have a dialogue. But if she does have a dialogue, it's going to present a table with all of her dialogues. Now, by default, whenever we generate a PDF, there is a watermark in it which says Scrite. Now, if you want to remove this watermark, simply go to Settings, Page Setup, and then you can uncheck the watermark. See, you did not even have to pay us for a pro version to do this. Now when you generate the character report for Jyoti, it will not have any watermark in it. Also, you need not generate the report in PDF. You can select Open Document Format to generate an ODT file which you can open in Word. This was about character report for a single character. Sometimes you may want to generate character report for 2 characters or maybe more than 2 characters at once, maybe because they're all played by the same actor. So you can go to this menu here and select Reports, Character Report, and then switch to the Characters tab. Now you can select the characters you want to generate the report for. In this case, we are generating the report for Bharat and Rakesh. Now, if I want to search for Rakesh, I can simply type Rakesh and hit the Enter key. So it's going to highlight where Rakesh is. I can then check mark Rakesh and I'll click on Generate. This is now going to generate a character report for both Bharat and Rakesh. Now that was about character report. Now let's say you want to extract a subset of the screenplay which has all the scenes in which, for example, Carolyn is present and have her dialogues highlighted. So I can click on Carolyn and then click on Character Screenplay, and now I'm going to hit Generate. This is going to generate a character screenplay for Carolyn. Now this one is going to contain complete scenes in which Carolyn is present, except that whenever there is a dialogue for Carolyn, it's going to be highlighted in yellow. Again, like character report, character screenplay can also be generated in ODT format, in open document format. And much like the character report, we can also generate character screenplay for 2 or more characters at once. This is character screenplay of both Akshay and Ashok. Now we have another report called location report. This report contains summary of all locations used in the screenplay. This report can also be generated in PDF as you are seeing now, and also in open document format. Location screenplay is another kind of report in which you can select 1 or more locations and then generate the PDF report. Now this will contain all of the scenes that are located at this location. You'll actually see the entire scene contents in this report. The screenplay subset report lets you extract a subset of scenes from your screenplay. You can extract scenes from a specific episode if your screenplay has episodes, or scenes that belong to a specific structure beat if you have marked structural elements on your screenplay, or you can switch to the Scenes tab and then filter for a bunch of scenes. For example, let's say I want to generate a screenplay subset for all the scenes that happen interior and at night. Now I can click on Select All. It's going to select all of the scenes that happen interior and at night. And now I can hit the Generate button. The resulting PDF will contain a subset of scenes that are interior and at night. Again, this report can be generated in both PDF and in open document format. Finally, I want to show you the scene versus character matrix. This is a very interesting report. I'm simply going to hit Generate. This one generates a table of all scenes and all characters such that you can easily make out the presence of different characters in different scenes. Now this is in PDF. You can generate the same report in CSV format, which we can open in Excel or Numbers or OpenOffice Calc to get a spreadsheet view. We are hoping to add support for more reports in future updates, but as you can see, the existing ones are comprehensive enough. Like I said before, we have close to 4,000 writers on Scrite, and they fall into one of these categories. One category of writers are professional screenwriters who write for a living. Another category of writers are those who are writing their very first screenplay in Scrite. And yet another category of writers are those who are learning how to write screenplays in a film school. For these writers, we wanted to put together a feature that would allow them to enjoy and appreciate the way in which the words on the screenplay come alive on the screen. And that's why we put together the Scrited Tab. You can open a screenplay in Scrite and load the film video in the Scrited Tab and then synchronize time offsets of the video to corresponding paragraphs in the screenplay to create these kind of synchronized video and screenplay presentations that would allow you to enjoy and appreciate the way in which words on the screenplay come alive on the screen. You can visit our website to understand how to make use of the Scrited tab. I hope you liked what you saw today, and I wholeheartedly welcome you to join the growing family of Scrite users around the world. As you write your next screenplay on Scrite, please feel free to share your experiences, questions, and comments and feedback on our community forum. I wish you all the best as you write your next big blockbuster in Scrite. Thank you so much for your time today. Namaste.